The doors to the Viridian Tea House are open once more. Hey everybody, it's good to see you again. Well, without further ado, let's get to reviewing some books, shall we? So these two authors, one of them I'd actually heard of, and he and I share a birthday. The other is brand new to me, and yet he's one of those authors where I'm like, why didn't I hear about this man sooner? So let's start with the one I've heard before. I feel privileged and honored that I share a birthday with Langston Hughes. He is one of my idols. If you're not familiar with him, he was a poet and a writer and pretty much a Renaissance man during the Harlem Renaissance. And whenever people think of Harlem Renaissance or they hear about it, one of the first few names that people mention is Langston Hughes. And this book is my first time reading it. It's called Not Without Laughter. This was a great read to me. I know, every book I talk about on this video is a great read, but let me read the back of it for you. Let's see. When first published in 1930, Not Without Laughter established Langston Hughes as not only a brilliant poet and leading light of the Harlem Renaissance, but also a gifted novelist. Very true. Gifted doesn't even begin to describe Mr. Hughes, but in telling the story of Sandy Rogers, a young African-American boy in small-town Kansas, and of his family, his mother, Angie, a housekeeper for a wealthy white family, his irresponsible father, Jim Boy, I actually like Jim Boy, who plays the guitar and travels the country in search of employment, his strong-willed grandmother, Hagar, who clings to her faith, his aunt Tempest, who marries a rich man, and his aunt Harriet, who struggles to make it as a blues singer. Hughes gives the longings and lineaments of Black life in early 20th century an important place in the history of racially divided America. This was one of those, I call it like slice of life stories. There's it actually begins with a storm and it ends with change and growth and going beyond what you thought was just supposed to be your world, what was told to you. This is all you're supposed to know about. But it ends with, no, that's not really the case. Like I said, I love Jim Boy and his travels, and even though the other characters in the book claim that he was shiftless and good for nothing, I liked him. He had this musician spirit, and I think he did love his wife, Angie. I think he did. That's all I can really say about him. Tempe, or Tempest, that was her full name. She was the one of the three daughters who was the well-to-do. And she looked down upon Black folks who were not as educated as her and her husband were, or were. And just the conversations that she had with her nephew, Sandy, it's very different than the conversations that Sandy had with Harriet and his own mother. Harriet, she stumbled a couple of times in life, but she eventually found her place. And I was kind of rooting for her too. So let me see if I can find a spot to maybe read from. Let's see. Well, this is just random, but let's see. All the neighborhood, white or colored, called his grandmother when something happened. She was a good nurse, they said, and sick folks liked her around. Aunt Hagar always came when they called, too, bringing maybe a little soup that she had made, or a jelly. Sometimes they paid her, and sometimes they didn't. But Sandy never had to sit outdoors in the darkness waiting for her before. He leaned his small back against the top step and rested his elbows on the porch behind him. It was growing late, and the people in the streets had all disappeared. There in the dark, the little fellow began to think about his mother, who worked on the other side of town for a rich white lady named Mrs. J.J. Rice. And suddenly frightful thoughts came into his mind. Suppose she had left for home just as the storm came up. Almost always his mother was home before dark, but she wasn't there tonight when the storm came, and she should have been home. This thought appalled him. She should have been there, but maybe she had been caught by the storm and blown away as she walked down Main Street. Maybe Angie had been carried off by the great black wind that had overturned the Gavitt's house and taken his grandma's porch flying through the air. Maybe the cyclone had gotten his mother, Sandy thought. He wanted her. Where was she? Had something terrible happened to her? Where was she now? That was toward the beginning, but again, I like this slice of life book. And yes, it's set in this small town in Kansas, so you would automatically think, oh, things must have been so much better than down in the South. Yes and no. And I liked how the characters in this book talked about living in the South and how a couple of them came from the South and said, yeah, it's worse down there. But I've always been a fan of Langston Hughes' poetry. And then when I found out that he and I shared a birthday, I was like, this just makes it even better. But Not Without Laughter is one hell of a read. And actually, a friend of mine on Instagram mentioned that he had read it and he thoroughly enjoyed it too. And it was very engaging. So Kurt, if you're watching this, you were very right about that. So Langston Hughes, Not Without Laughter. I give it Viridian Tea House's 5 Cups of Tea. An excellent slice of life book regarding racially divided America in the 1930s. And if you were into poetry or you're looking to try a new poet or you haven't read Langston Hughes in a while, do yourself a favor and get a couple of his books, and especially his prose, Not Without Laughter. His poetry, his prose, you can't not go wrong with Langston Hughes. So thank you, Mr. Hughes. Just thank you. You were, always will be one of my inspirations. One of the reasons why I am creative today. So thank you. If you're watching from the Great Beyond Jazz Club, thank you. So, and speaking of Harlem Renaissance, there's a trend today. This is an author that I'd never heard of before, and I feel terrible that I'd never heard of this man before, but that will change. I am talking about Rudolph Fisher and the book The Conjure Man Dies. I actually saw this book when I was up in Boulder at the Boulder bookstore waiting for a book signing for David Gandelman. That was the last video. And I'll never forget, I was just kind of sitting in a chair like this, and I just happened to look down at one of the bookshelves, and this was sitting on the side. And I was like, The Conjure Man Dies, a Harlem mystery. Never even heard of this until I read the back, and I'll read it for you. When the body of Ngana Frimbo, the African conjure man, is discovered in his consultation room, Perry Dart, one of Harlem's 10 black police detectives, is called in to investigate. Together with Dr. Archer, a physician from across the street, Dart is determined to solve the baffling mystery, helped and hindered by Bubba Brown and Jinx Jenkins. Those two I'll talk about them later. Local boys keen to clear themselves of suspicion of murder and undertake their own investigations. The Conjure Man Dies was the very first detective novel written by an African American. I feel terrible that I did not know this. But anyway, a distinguished doctor and accomplished musician and dramatist. That is right, dramatist. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, okay? I've had blueberries. What do you expect? Rudolph Fisher was one of the principal writers of the Harlem Renaissance, but died in 1934, aged only 37 years old. With a gripping plot and vividly drawn characters, Fisher's witty novel is a remarkable time capsule of one of the most exciting eras in the history of Black fiction. Let's see. Oh, so this also has the short story called John Archer's Nose, which was pretty good too. But The Conjure Man Dies was a great murder mystery. There were twists and turns and funny moments, especially with Bubber and Jinx. Not like Laurel and Hardy, I don't even know, but I loved reading their conversations back and forth. But just a well thought out murder mystery. Like I said, plots and twists, engaging characters, and every character in the book was Black. The police detectives, the witnesses, everybody was Black. I think maybe one character was white, maybe, but everybody else was Black. And the murder mystery was set in Harlem too. So I truly enjoyed reading this. And actually, let's see, he actually wrote, the first book that he ever wrote was called The Walls of Jericho. That was in 1928. He was inspired by books by Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers, which led him to write The Conjure Man Dies. Again, you know, that's one thing that I love about bookstores. You go in and you may be looking for a particular title or a particular author, but sometimes you go in and you just go, you know, I'm just going to see what interests me today. And I already had a stack of books because Boulder Bookstore is amazing, and thank goodness they are not around the corner for me because I would be so broke. But The Conjure Man Dies, like, I didn't even plan on it. I never even heard of him until I reached out to my publisher and I said, hey, have you read this? Have you heard of this guy? And she said, yeah, really good. And I went, sold, because my publisher is very, very well versed in all things literature and book related anything. But yes, I devoured this book just like the Langston Hughes, Not Without Laughter. And I found myself saying to myself, I am like Rudolph Fisher and I'm like Langston Hughes. And I feel, I don't want to say honored, but it just gave me a really special, awesome feeling to read these two books. Just truly an amazing feeling. So Rudolph Fisher's The Conjure Man Dies, a Harlem mystery, gets, this ought to be a shocker, 5 cups of tea from Viridian Tea House. So Mr. Fisher, if you are hanging out with Mr. Hughes in the great jazz club of Beyond, again, thank you. Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to read The Walls of Jericho because I know I'm going to love it. I'll have to hunt it down because Colorado has a ton of bookstores. One of them has to have copies of it. So again, Rudolph Fisher, The Conjure Man Dies, and Langston Hughes, Not Without Laughter, both get 5 cups of tea from Viridian Tea House. Excellent, excellent, excellent books. Highly recommended. I cannot express, just highly recommended. Which leads me to the tea part of the video. And again, we're running with the same theme of the Harlem Renaissance. So this is, I don't know if you can, oh, it's actually cooled down. This is one of my blends. It's called Harlem Muse. And for those of you who have probably saw the blend whenever I've sold it at conventions or looking at it on the Etsy store, Harlem Muse was inspired by another Harlem Renaissance writer named Nella Larsen. She wrote 2 novels, Passing and, oh goodness, I forgot the other title, Quicksand, and a bunch of short stories. There was actually a manuscript for a 3rd book that involved, I think it was a love triangle or something, but sadly, there are no copies of it. I think I've said this before, but I actually reached out to a biographer who had done a book about Nella Larsen, asking him, is there a copy of the book? Is there a manuscript, something? And he said, sadly, there was not. So who knows, you know, it would be amazing if somebody found that third manuscript by Nella Larson, because if I had the money, I would totally get it published and put it out there. But yes, so Harlem Muse is one of my white tea blends blended with jasmine and lemon balm. So a lot of white teas, of course, this is a little bit darker, mostly due to the jasmine and the lemon balm, but white teas are known as the least processed of all teas. Now remember, all the teas, anything involving Camellia sinensis comes from one plant. There's Camellia sinensis, and then there's Camellia sinensis assamica, which is in India. But same plant, it just all depends on how you process it and oxidize it. So with white tea like this, it is plucked and dried, and that's pretty much it. There are not too many steps. No oxidation, none of that. Now, the darker the tea is, the more processing and oxidation you're going to get. But with white tea, this is almost like tea in its purest form, pretty much. And I don't know if you can see, but that's what my blend looks like. But yes, I wanted to, Nella Larson is another inspirational author for me. I read her 2 books, and she deals with a different subject of the Harlem Renaissance. She deals with people who are biracial. One parent is black, one parent is white, and how they're not, in 1930s, were not really accepted by either blacks or whites. So, and some tried to pass and all that kind of stuff. But yes, if you get a chance to read Passing or Quicksand by Nella Larson, I highly recommend it. I truly do. So, in honor of Rudolph Fisher and Langston Hughes and Nella Larson, this is a huge cup of Harlem Muse in my lovely Snoopy mug. So, there you go. This has a soft mouthfeel. And what I mean by that is it actually it's not, in my terms, it's not fighting my mouth and my tongue. It's not fighting my senses. It feels like velvet in a way. I am definitely getting the lemon balm and the jasmine and the white tea as well, but this is such a delicate blend. I'm getting flavors, but it's all just kind of rolling into one, and this is actually really good for spring and summer to ice it down, actually. And you may want to add sweetener like sugar, maybe agave or something like that, but honestly, kind of don't really need it. It's really good. So Bai Mudan, or its other name is white peony. It is good for, let me just make sure I have this right, or little peony, excuse me. It's usually a standard pluck, which is 2 leaves and a bud. A fine pluck is like 1 leaf and 1 bud, and then a coarse pluck is like more than 2 leaves and a bud or whatever, but most of the teas are a standard pluck. So a Bai Mudan or little or white peony is a standard pluck, 2 leaves, 1 bud. And I figured I'd write down some information because I have so much stuff going on in my head. I have to write it down to remember stuff. Some of the benefits of white tea are very high in antioxidants. Some people say that the antioxidants are actually higher in white tea than in green tea. Everybody knows tea is good for you anyway. Green tea tends to have a lot more antioxidants than black tea. Well, supposedly white tea has even more than that, probably because to the least number of processing steps. possibly. Also, it is good to reduce inflammation, and it's also good for dental hygiene too. I mean, still brush and use Listerine and all that, but you're doing your mouth a favor when you drink white tea or the Bai Mu Dan. So once again, this is Harlem Muse, inspired by the works of Nella Larson, made by my tea company, Viridian Tea Company, and the ingredients are Bai Mu Dan, jasmine, and lemon balm. That is really good. That is truly, truly good. I'm staring at my container. It's like, oh, that's really good. Wow. That is very, very, very good. I'm trying to see if there's any of the 3 ingredients that I can taste after swallowing. And honestly, the only one that I'm getting maybe a hint of more would be the jasmine. And it's not overpowering. This is not like, oh God, perfume. It's not like that at all. It's floral, sweet hay kind of taste to it. But you can definitely tell it's jasmine. Actually, I'm gonna put this in mine. Don't tell anybody. All right, well, before I get to my little tea meditation, once again, 5 cups of tea for the books Not Without Laughter by Langston Hughes. I'm not worthy. I am just not worthy. And Rudolph Fisher's The Conjure Man, A Harlem Mystery. Both give 5 cups of tea. Excellent, excellent works. And again, the tea for this video is Harlem Muse, made by my tea company, inspired by the works of Nella Larson. And the ingredients are Bai Mu Dan, white tea, jasmine, and lemon balm. So let's get ready for our tea meditation. And you know the usual, just take your 3 standard sips of tea, let it roll around in your mouth, really get to know whatever tea you're drinking today. And then when you swallow, just see what flavors linger in your mouth. You don't really need to focus on anything, just enjoy your tea for just a few seconds. Nothing else matters except for you and your tea. So let's take a deep breath in. Breathe. And exhale. One more time. All right, take your cup of tea and enjoy. First sip. Second sip. Third sip. Set your tea down. One more deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And in ending, one thing that I noticed is every time I exhaled or just swallowed my tea, I got the lemon balm, which actually has a minty kind of taste to it, but that's very interesting. And drinking it from a meditative point of view, the lemon balm really came to the forefront and the other 2 ingredients kind of supported it. That's very interesting. Tea fascinates me. and I'm always learning more and more about tea. And for those of you who don't know, I am going to hopefully enroll back into the World Tea Academy to begin my certification toward becoming a tea professional. So I'm looking forward to this, and as I connect with other tea lovers and tea travelers and teachers and students and masters and what have you, I'm always learning something new about tea. And I love the fact that even when it's really hot outside, I can still drink a cup of a white or an oolong or even a green, and I'm actually cooled down. I mean, then sometimes I'll do an iced, but even at a decent temperature, I still get that cooling down sensation. Like with this, it's still kind of hot. I made this about 25 minutes ago and it's still hot, but I feel quite chilled and groovy in a way. So I'm so glad that I started this tea path, and I just wanted to be with me for the rest of my life, pretty much so. And for all of you who watch these videos, and I hope you learn a little bit of something from my crazy tea antics and books and all this kind of stuff. I hope that you can take something away and say, I didn't even know about that. So again, as I always say, I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to watch these videos and listen to me ramble and learn something new about tea or about an author you may have heard of or never heard of before. So just thank you as always. I truly do appreciate you guys. Thank you. So without further ado, time to wrap up, time to close the doors of the tea house once more. Take care of yourself and each other, and raise your teacup high, drink slowly, and don't forget to go ah. Till next time, take care. Bye.